I didn't burn my father's life to the ground because of the decade of torment he inflicted on me in the silence of our home. I didn't do it for the bruises I hid, for the fear that was my constant companion, or for the childhood he stole from me piece by piece. I endured all of that. I became a ghost to survive it. No, I destroyed him, his reputation, his standing in our small town, and his secret hidden world on a rainy Tuesday afternoon because he came home early from work, reeking of whiskey, and he looked at my little sister, my 10-year-old sister, Lily, with the same darkness in his eyes that he had once reserved only for me. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself and to her ghost that his reign of terror ended right there. Not tomorrow. Today. Hi, everyone. I'm Grandma Grace. I'm 78 years old. I live here, in this small house in coastal Maine, with my 2 cats and a garden that is my greatest pride. I moved here a very long time ago to be near the sea. I like the sound of the foghorn at night. It's a steady, reliable sound. A sound that promises there is a light in the darkness, a guide to bring you safely to shore. For a very long time, I had to be my own foghorn. The story I am about to tell you is one I have held in the locked vault of my heart for over 60 years. It is the story that shaped every single day of my life that followed. It's a story of a home that was not a home, but a cage, ruled by a man who was not a father, but a monster who wore a father's face. And it's the story of the fierce, desperate love for a little sister that finally gave me the strength to pick the lock and burn the whole terrible cage to the ground. I have never told the full truth to anyone. Not my husband, who I love dearly. Not my own children. How do you explain a darkness like that? How do you articulate a betrayal so fundamental? It poisons the very concept of family. The shame of it keeps your tongue tied. But I am an old woman now, and I have learned a thing or two about shame. It is a parasite. It only has the power you give it. And today, I am taking all its power away. Before I begin, I'd like to ask for your quiet support. If you could press that like button and subscribe to my channel, it is a small gesture that feels enormous to me. It is an act of bearing witness. It says that the stories that hide in the shadows deserve to see the light. Thank you for that. Now, let me take you back to a house with dark green shutters and a secret that was killing me. My story begins in a small, suffocating town in rural Ohio. In the 1950s, a town where everyone knew everyone's business, or thought they did. A town of church socials, pristine lawns, and secrets that were buried deeper than the bedrock. We lived in a 2-story house with dark green shutters and a weeping willow in the backyard. From the outside, it was a picture postcard of the American dream. Inside, it was a different world. My father, John, was a pillar of the community. He owned a local hardware store, the kind of place where farmers and townsfolk would gather on a Saturday morning to drink coffee and trade gossip. He was the president of the Rotary Club. He was an usher at our church, his deep voice leading the hymns, his hand steady as he passed the collection plate. To the town, he was John Albright, a good man, a family man, a successful businessman. He was respected, even admired. That was his public face. It was a masterpiece of fiction. His private face was a thing of terror. The moment he walked through the front door of our house, the atmosphere would change. It was a physical shift, like a drop in barometric pressure before a violent storm. The air would grow thick, heavy with a silent, crackling tension. My mother, a woman who seemed to be slowly fading into the floral wallpaper of our home, would begin a frantic, silent dance of appeasement. His coat had to be hung just so. His newspaper laid on the table by his armchair, folded perfectly. His dinner on the table at precisely 6 o'clock, not a minute before, not a minute after. Any deviation from this rigid, unspoken script could, and often would, result in an explosion of rage. My mother, God rest her soul, was a ghost long before she died. She was a woman paralyzed by fear and a deep ingrained belief that a wife's duty was to keep a peaceful home, no matter the cost. And the cost was her voice, her spirit, and eventually, her children's safety. She saw what was happening. She must have. But she chose to be blind. Her blindness was her own survival strategy. It was a betrayal I could not understand as a child, but that I have, with 60 years of perspective, come to see as its own quiet tragedy. And then there was Lily, my little sister. She was 6 years younger than me, a tiny, bright flame in the gray fog of our house. She was born with a heart full of sunshine, a child who laughed easily and saw magic everywhere. She had my mother's pale blonde hair and a constellation of freckles across her nose. From the moment she was born, she became the center of my universe. She was my purpose. I loved her with a ferocity that was primal, a love that was part mother, part sister, part fierce bodyguard. Protecting her light from the encroaching darkness of our father, became the single, defining mission of my young life. Before the real darkness began, my childhood was a series of lessons in fear. I learned to read my father's moods like a meteorologist reads the sky. The way he set his jaw, the sound his car made coming up the driveway, the smell of whiskey on his breath when he came home late, a sweet, sickly smell that to this day makes my stomach clench. I learned to make myself small, to be invisible, to live in the margins of our home, to never, ever draw his attention. Life was a tightrope walk over a pit of fire. And for a few precious years, I managed to keep my balance. I thought, in my childish innocence, that if I could be perfect, if I could be quiet, if I could absorb all his dark energy, I could keep the monster in its cage. I could keep Lily safe. It was a fool's hope. The shift, when it came, was not a sudden earthquake. It was a slow, creeping poison that seeped into the foundations of our home. It began when I was 12, the year I started to develop the awkward, budding curves of a young woman. It was as if my changing body was a personal affront to him, a betrayal of the perfect doll-like child I was supposed to remain. His cruelty, which had before been a general atmospheric thing, now began to have a specific target. Me. It started with words that were like small, sharp stones, thrown with casual precision. If I got a B on a report card, he would look at it with disgust. Are you stupid or just lazy? An Albright does not get Bs. If a boy from school called the house for me, he would answer the phone, his voice a low growl, and then tell me, "Don't you be getting ideas, girl. No daughter of mine is going to be a common tramp." He began to police my appearance. My skirts were too short. My laughter was too loud. My very presence seemed to irritate him, to fill him with a restless, angry energy. My inner world became a frantic, desperate calculation. What did I do wrong? How can I fix it? If I am quieter, if I am smarter, if I am less visible, will he stop? I began to believe it was my fault. I was a problem to be solved, an irritant to be soothed. The shame was a constant companion, a heavy, itchy wool coat I could never take off. Then came the physical violence. I remember the first time as if it were etched in glass. I had accidentally spilled a glass of milk at the dinner table. It was a simple, childish mistake. My father's face, which had been placid a moment before, contorted into a mask of pure rage. He didn't shout. He stood up, walked around the table, and backhanded me across the face. The shock was absolute. Not just the sting on my cheek, but the shock of the act itself. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked at my mother, my eyes pleading. She was staring down at her plate, her hands trembling in her lap. She didn't move. She didn't speak. In her silence, she gave him her permission. Lily, who was only 6, let out a small, terrified gasp. That sound, her fear, was 1,000 times more painful than the blow to my face. From that day on, the violence became a regular, unpredictable feature of our lives. A misplaced book, a meal that was not to his liking, a perceived sullen look on my face. Anything could set him off. The weapon of choice was his belt. A thick, black leather belt with a heavy brass buckle. The sound of him unbuckling it was the most terrifying sound in the world. I became an expert at hiding the bruises. I wore long sleeves in the summer. I learned to lie to the school nurse, to my friends, to the world. "I'm so clumsy," I'd say with a bright, false smile. I fell down the stairs again. My life became a double life. The girl I was at school, a quiet, studious girl who was well liked but kept her distance. And the girl I was at home, a silent, watchful creature whose only goal was to get through the day without incident. My primary mission was to shield Lily. I became her shadow, her buffer. If our father came home in a black mood, I would whisk her out to the backyard to look for four-leaf clovers. If he started to raise his voice at dinner, I would deliberately spill my water, drawing his fire onto myself. I took her beatings for her. I remember one evening, Lily had left her roller skates on the front walk, and he tripped over them coming up the porch steps. His rage was immediate and volcanic. He grabbed her by her small arm, ready to strike, and I threw myself between them. "It was me, Papa," I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I left them there. It was my fault." The beating I received that night was severe, but as I lay in my bed, every part of my body aching, I felt a strange, fierce sense of victory. Lily was safe. I had done my job. She knew, of course. Not the details, but she knew. We developed a secret language, a language of glances, of small, almost imperceptible hand signals. A slight widening of my eyes meant go to your room now. A quick touch on her shoulder meant be quiet, don't speak. She was a smart, sensitive child, and she learned the rules of our dangerous world quickly. But I tried, with every fiber of my being, to preserve a small pocket of innocence for her. I would read to her in bed at night, our heads together under the covers with a flashlight, creating a small, magical tent of safety. I would tell her stories about a world where fathers were kind and homes were safe. I was creating a fiction for her to live in, while I lived in the brutal reality. The years between 12 and 16 were a long, gray, suffocating tunnel of fear. I was completely isolated. How could I have friends over? How could I explain the sudden tense silences, the atmosphere of dread, the man who was a smiling saint at church and a raging monster at home? I felt like I was living in a horror movie that no one else could see. My mother's denial became an active, aggressive force. If she saw a bruise on my arm, she would look away and start talking loudly about the weather. She was a collaborator in my father's tyranny, a willing prisoner who helped guard the other inmates. The question that haunted me, the one that kept me awake at night, was I crazy? Was I imagining the malice in his eyes? Was this normal? In a world without outside references, without anyone to say this is not okay, your reality begins to warp. You start to believe the narrative of the abuser. I am difficult. I am ungrateful. I am the cause of the problem. That self-blame was the most effective chain on my prison cell. But all of that, all of it, I could endure. I had learned how. I had built walls around my heart. I had perfected the art of being a ghost. I could take the beatings. I could absorb the hatred. I could live in the fear, as long as it was directed at me, as long as Lily's light was not extinguished. I was the lightning rod, drawing the storm away from her. And I was willing to be struck, over and over, as long as she remained untouched. The day the world ended and began anew was a Tuesday in October 2010. I was 16. Lily was 10. It was a gray, rainy, miserable day. The kind of day that mirrored the inside of our house. My father, who almost never came home before 6, walked through the front door at 3 in the afternoon. The sound of the key in the lock sent a jolt of pure ice through my vein. An unscheduled appearance was always a bad sign. He was drunk. Not stumbling, sloppy drunk, but the quiet, coiled, menacing kind of drunk that was his most dangerous state. His eyes were glassy, and the sweet, sick smell of whiskey was a cloud around him. He had apparently had a fight with a supplier and had closed the store early to come home and brood. Lily and I were in the living room, trying to do our homework. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her books, her little face scrunched up in concentration. I was at the table, pretending to read, but my every nerve ending was tuned to him, to the storm that had just entered the house. He stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, and his gaze swept over the room. It landed on Lily. And I saw it. I saw the look. The darkness. The possessive, ugly look that had been reserved only for me for 4 years. It was now turned on her. On my 10-year-old sister. "Look at you," he slurred, his voice a low, ugly rumble. "Getting to be a little lady, aren't you? Come over here. Let your papa have a look at you." Lily looked up, her face a mask of confusion and dawning fear. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a question. And in that moment, something inside me, some ancient, primal, protective instinct, broke free from the cage of fear I had lived in for so long. The part of me that had been willing to be the victim, to absorb the pain, to be the lightning rod, it died. And in its place, a warrior rose up. A cold, clear-headed, and absolutely ruthless warrior, whose only mission was the complete and total annihilation of the threat to her sister. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tense air like a shard of glass. It was the first time I had ever directly defied him. He turned his gaze to me, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say to me, girl?" I said. "No," I repeated, standing up slowly, placing myself between him and Lily. "Leave her alone, Grace," Lily whispered from the floor, her voice trembling. "It's okay." "No, it's not," I said, my eyes locked on my father's. "Go to your room, Lily. Lock the door, and do not come out until I tell you to." She hesitated for a second, then, seeing the look on my face, a look she had never seen before, she scrambled to her feet and ran from the room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, and the click of her bedroom door locked. Now it was just him and me. "You've got a smart mouth on you today," he said, taking a menacing step towards me. "I think it's time you learned another lesson in respect." He started to unbuckle his belt, but the fear was gone. It was just gone, replaced by a strange, icy calm. As he came towards me, I did something I had never done. I didn't cower. I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye, and I spoke. "If you touch me," I said, my voice as cold and hard as a block of ice, "it will be the last time. I will go to the police. I will go to the minister. I will go to every one of your Rotary Club friends, and I will show them the bruises. I will tell them everything. And this nice little life you've built for yourself will be over. Is that what you want?" He stopped. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. He was seeing a stranger. The obedient, terrified girl was gone. He was seeing someone who was no longer playing by his rules. The bluff, born of pure desperation, had worked. He hesitated, and in his hesitation, I saw my path. He was a coward. His power was built on our fear and our silence, and his greatest fear was the world seeing him for the monster he was. His reputation was his Achilles' heel. He lowered his hand from his belt. He didn't hit me. He just glared at me with pure, undiluted hatred, and then he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, my body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline, but my mind was a place of perfect, cold clarity. The awakening was absolute. This could not happen again. He would try again. Next time he might succeed. A bluff was not a long-term strategy. I had to get us out. But how? We had no money. We had nowhere to go. My plan began to form that very night, born from the memory of my father's one obsession outside of his own rage, his business, his hardware store. He was fanatically private about his finances. He did his own books, late at night, in his small locked office in the back of the store. An office no one, not even my mother, was ever allowed to enter. I had a sudden, clear memory of him, years ago, boasting to a friend about how he had weathered the taxmen during a tough year. There was a secret there. And a secret, I now understood, was a weapon. My action was not impulsive. It was a calculated act of espionage. For the next 2 weeks, I became a spy in my own home. I watched him. I studied his routines. I knew that he kept a spare set of keys to the store in the top drawer of his bedside table. I waited for the perfect opportunity. It came on a Friday night when he and my mother went to a dinner party. I put Lily to bed, reading her a story until she fell asleep. Then, I went to work. I took the keys from his drawer. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be still. I slipped out of the house and ran the 6 blocks to the town's deserted Main Street. The hardware store was dark and silent. Letting myself in felt like a massive transgression, a point of no return. The air inside smelled of metal, oil, and fertilizer. I went straight to his office. The door was locked, as expected. But I had come prepared. I used a bobby pin from my hair, a trick I'd seen in a movie, and after 10 minutes of frantic, clumsy work, the lock clicked open. The office was small and obsessively neat. On his desk was a large, leather-bound ledger. I opened it. It was his official business ledger, the one he would show an accountant. But I knew there had to be more. I searched the room. In the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, under a stack of old catalogs, I found it. A second ledger. A small, black, unassuming notebook. I opened it, and my world tilted again. It was a meticulous, handwritten record of every cash transaction, every under-the-table deal, every bit of income he had hidden from the government for the past 15 years. He wasn't just a monster. He was a common crook. He had been skimming profits, tens of thousands of dollars, and hiding it. But where was the money? Not in a bank, that was for sure. I thought about my father, his habits, his paranoia. And then I remembered the old, unused wood-burning stove in the back room of the store. The one that was never lit. I went to it. It was cold and filled with cobwebs. I reached inside, my hand feeling around in the dusty darkness. And then my fingers brushed against it. A heavy metal cash box. It was locked. I carried it back to the office, and using a screwdriver from a display rack, I pried it open. Inside was a universe of betrayal. Stacks and stacks of cash. Old, soft bills, bound with rubber bands. I didn't count it. I knew it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. It was his secret, his power, his escape hatch. And now, it was mine. I took the black ledger, and I took every single bill from the cash box. I left the box empty. I locked the office, locked the front door of the store, and ran home, my heart a wild drum against my ribs. I hid the money and the ledger in the back of my closet, under a loose floorboard. The escape was planned with the precision of a military operation. I had the weapon, the ledger, and I had the means, the cash. I waited 2 more days, until Sunday. Sunday was church day. It was the day my father's public face was most on display. That morning, while he and my mother were getting ready, I went into Lily's room. I had a small suitcase packed for her, with her favorite dress, her doll, and a few books. "Lily," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "We're going on a trip, a long one. We have to leave now, and we can't tell anyone." She looked at me, her eyes full of a trust that both broke my heart and gave me infinite strength. She didn't question me. She just nodded. "Okay, Grace," she whispered. We slipped out the back door while they were in the front of the house. I had a small bag of my own, containing the money and the ledger. We walked to the bus station on the other side of town. I bought 2 one-way tickets to New York City, a place so big and so far away, I was sure he could never find us. As the bus pulled away from the station, I looked back at the small, suffocating town I had called home. I felt no nostalgia, only the profound, earth-shattering relief of a prisoner tasting freedom for the first time. When we got to New York, I used the cash to rent a small, clean apartment in a part of the city where no one would look for 2 girls from rural Ohio. I enrolled Lily in a new school under a slightly different last name. I got a job as a waitress, and then as a secretary. I was 16 years old, and I was a mother, a sister, and a provider, all at once. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and it was the most liberating. The resolution for my father came in a plain, manila envelope a month later. I had made copies of the most damning pages of his secret ledger. I sent one copy to the Internal Revenue Service, and I sent another copy, anonymously, to Mr. Henderson, the head of the Rotary Club and my father's biggest rival. I never knew the exact fallout. We were gone, but I can imagine it. The federal tax audit would have been the beginning. It would have ruined him financially. But the public humiliation, the whispers, the loss of his precious reputation in that small, judgmental town, that would have destroyed his soul. The weapon he had built to protect himself had become the instrument of his own destruction. His power, built on secrets and fear, was dismantled by the truth. The lesson I learned, the lesson that has been the compass for the rest of my life, is this. Love, true love, is not passive. It is not about quiet endurance. It is an active, fierce, and sometimes ruthless force. The love I had for my sister gave me the courage to do things I never thought I was capable of. And I learned that you cannot wait for a hero to save you. You must become your own hero. You must be willing to burn down the prison, even if it's the only home you've ever known. My advice to you, to anyone listening who is living in a house of fear, who is being hurt by someone who is supposed to love them, is this. Your silence will not protect you. It will only protect your abuser. Find one person, one resource, one lifeline, and speak your truth. A secret's power evaporates in the light. You are stronger than you know, and you deserve to be safe. Your life, your future, is worth fighting for. Thank you for letting me unburden my heart today. To give voice to the 16-year-old girl who was so brave, and to the 10-year-old girl who was so worth saving. Telling this story, all of it, feels like a final act of liberation. The ghosts of that house can no longer touch me here. If my story has moved you, please share it. It may be the foghorn that someone else needs to hear in their own darkness. And please, don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Love, Grandma Grace. See you in the next story.